Good evening, everyone. Allison Scoberg here. Happy to be back here with you with ADA, the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, also known as ADA SR, the Southern Region. This organization has been around since 1987. It was founded by Pam Esser, and I lead the Fort Bend chapter. I'm just a volunteer. This chapter has been ongoing for quite some time. I think I've been at it 8 or 9 years now. And so tonight we are going to be talking about homeschooling and educating maybe the challenging learner. And we've got a lot of ideas and tips along the way. Some of the families may be homeschooling, some may be in public school, some may be in private school. Nevertheless, if you have a struggling learner, you're in the right place tonight. So I always like to go through a little couple of housekeeping items. First things first, we are in webinar mode tonight, and that means that we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there. We do like to take questions throughout the presentation. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, we'd like you to put those in the chat box, and we'll get to all of the questions that time allows for. We're going for an hour, so if you're planning your evening or dinner, we will be done by 7:30 tonight. And so a little bit more about ADA. After this meeting, tomorrow you guys will get an email with a link to with today's slides and also a link to the recording. So you don't have to take notes on every single thing you hear, because you are going to actually get a copy of the slides and the contact information and things like that. Also in the email, you will get an invitation to join ADDA. There's an application to join, and membership is quite cheap. And there's a lot of resources all across the greater Houston area, all across the state as it relates to these organizations and the groups. The group that I lead has typically been parents. Parents that have children that are kind of in that arena. ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder are typically the families that have attended our meetings. But there are other meetings across the city for adults with ADD or ADHD. There's all kinds of different groups out there. So if you're looking for a group for yourself, just know that there are groups out there, and Pam Esser is your contact. I do have a Facebook page. But the other thing that I wanted to mention to you is that coming up on April 20th, there is an opportunity in the greater Houston area. It's going to be at Monarch that ADA is sponsoring. And this is Neuroscience for the Neurodiverse, Risky Behavior, Addiction, Sensory Tech. And it's going on Saturday, April 20th from 9 a.m. to 12:30. There's 3 hours of CEs, and the sessions are the neuroscience and genetics of risky behavior and the implications for the neurodivergence, understanding the neurology of sensory and behavior, and then the last session is technology and the brain. So there's a lot of good sessions that's coming up April 20th, 9 to 12. I'm going to put the link in the chat box. And also, we are going to send a flyer out for this meeting. So if you want to join, that'll be in that email as well. And the cost for this is, if you're an ADA member, it's $65. Maybe I have that backwards. $45 for a member, $65 for a non-member. And if you want to join and attend, then it's $75. So that'll all be in the flyer, and you can check that out, but just mark your calendars for April 20th. So the deal with ADA, when Pam created this organization, it was her heart and her hope. She has a child, an adult child herself, and that this organization could provide resources and help as it relates to ADHD and ADD. And that, so we never require, so anybody that's here tonight, you're never ever required, there's never a big push for membership, like you have to join to be able to, listen in on any of the webinars. But you absolutely can join, and that's where that will be in that email as well. So having said that, we are very happy to have Elizabeth Sharpe here with us tonight. And I'm going to turn everything over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about you and what drives your passion for this.
Great. Oh, well, so great to be here. Thank you so much. So I'll tell you a little bit about my professional background, and then in the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about my passion and my personal. So I'm a learning and behavior therapist. What that means is parents reach out to me when they are usually struggling in a couple of areas. Either their child has ADD, ADHD, or has not been diagnosed and they're having behavior issues, and they're either not functioning well in public school, private school, charter school, and sometimes homeschooling settings. Sometimes I get calls about, I deal with dyslexia, reading issues, dysgraphia, which is writing issues, dyscalculia, which are math issues. Many times children who have ADD, ADHD, although not always, they can have other learning disabilities or other challenges academically. I also work with families when children have a lot of anxiety or teenagers have anxiety. And so any type around executive functioning, the ability to just function well. So that's when people reach out to me. I work with families all over the United States. I am based in Godley, Texas, which is a little bit outside of Fort Worth, a smaller town. And I do have 9 states that I work with in terms of clients. I also have clients in Canada, so I can work with anybody who has an internet connection. But I do see in my private office people in person. I'm also a homeschool coach, and how I began homeschooling, I'll tell you a little bit about my family in the next slide, but that came out of my own experience. I have homeschooled 1 and graduated, and then I have 2 that I currently homeschool as well. And then I am a marriage coach with my husband, and we work with couples, usually just referrals. We really enjoy doing that, and we've learned and trained quite a bit. We know that when you have a child who has special needs, when you have a child who is a unique learner, that can put a strain on the relationship quite significantly, statistically speaking. And so we have found our ways through helping people deal with those communication issues, etc. I have my formal training is I have a master's in education and counseling. I taught and trained teachers for over 17 years at the college level. Public school teachers, private school teachers, family child care providers. I also have been a behavior interventionist at Fort Worth ISD. I've also done private clients behavior interventionists in schools, and I also am certified in a myriad of intervention and trauma-informed coaching with children and families. Also anything around behavior, homeschooling, learning disabilities. At the college that I worked with in California, I developed a certification for parents and for students and future teachers around learning disabilities and special needs, as well as created internship opportunities and supervised interns who were trying to work with those populations. And these are my passion. And so the picture on the screen are my 3 kiddos. My eldest, who is 21 years old, she has 5 learning disabilities. One of them includes ADD. She is currently adulting well, lives in South Miami, runs a business, was homeschooled and graduated 2 years ago, is very involved in youth ministries, also coaches all-star cheerleading, and she is my biggest success story. But in the journey of homeschooling her, I knew nothing about learning disabilities. Even though I was an educator, I did not understand ADD or ADHD. I didn't understand learning disabilities. And so thus she was my test pilot. And if I could go and redo again, there were so many things. And so that created this real hunger of things I wish I needed to do. My other 2, the little boy that she's holding is my 9 years old today, who actually was adopted as an infant. I got him at 6 months old. He has ADHD. He's also on the spectrum, has PDA and sensory processing disorder. And then my youngest over here, Mr. Zachary, we just adopted. He just got placed in my home 3 weeks ago, full time. He is adoptable ready, which means when he came to us, he is ready for adoption. He's been waiting for a forever home. We are his forever home. And Zachary also has ADHD, and also, as I'm getting to learn about him, probably is also dyslexic and dyscalculia, and also some sensory issues. And so this is my passion, because ultimately no one helped me know the things I needed to know, and it wasn't all in one place. So when I worked families, I'm kind of a one-stop shop, and I can get you where you're going. And so what I wanted to talk about was behaviors, myths, and strategies. And we're going to do this quickly, but because I could talk about this all night. However, if you have questions, please post your question. There is no dumb question. I want this to be interactive. And in fact, I'm about to ask you an interactive question. This is about you and what you're currently searching for. And so these are the 3 things I'm going to highlight, not talk in depth because we cannot do that in an hour, but definitely, hopefully this will spark some interest or some questions. And I certainly can follow up with you if that is your need. Yeah, Yolanda saying I have nowhere to start. Well, this will be a good overview. So let's go to the next question. When you are looking at a resistant learner, whether you're homeschooling them, public, private, charter, if you can answer this, put in the chat, what are the behaviors you see from resistant learners? And I use that word very intentionally, resistant versus children don't want to learn. And we're going to talk about why that is. And so if you have a child that right now does not want to learn anything, whether that's academics, whether that's they don't want to do their chores, whether that's they don't want to eat, it doesn't matter. They have resistance, all right? And so, yes, they run away. Absolutely. So I see that we've got some here. And procrastination, yes. Tears. I'm a great procrastinator of working out. I get that. Right. So you see tears sometimes in parents, in our own tears. And so we see these behaviors. And here is the challenge is that one thing, step 1, when I work with families is we focus on the behavior instead of some other things, right? And so the behavior is a symptom. And so we've got to remember that when we see resistant behavior, we have to not focus on that's what's happening. We have to focus on that's a symptom. When you have a cold, you sneeze. Sneezing is the symptom. The root issue is a virus, right? Mine always forgets. Yeah, mine too. Yeah, I'm with you and I forget too. So yes, forgetting is definitely one. So there are many, 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 and no 2 children are alike around what resistant behavior looks like. Many times resistant behavior is labeled and it's labeled as, disobedience, disrespect, and it goes on and on and on, right? And so, but there are many, and if we've got 2 ADHD kids together, they may present these resistant behaviors differently. So no 2 children are exactly alike. And so that's really important, okay? Let me give you the good news in just a second. Let's go to the next slide and ask you another question because I'm going to give you some good news. What are the emotions for a resistant learner? And so now I don't want you to tell me behavior because we have to learn to separate them between behavior and emotion. What are the emotions of a resistant learner for the student, for the child, for the teen, for the young adult, and for you? Anger, there we go. We're getting a lot of anger. Yes, anger. And one thing's frustration, right? Both parent and child, right? Frustration is definitely, and here's the thing that is really important, something to really remember, and that is anger is a secondary emotion. It is not a primary emotion. What does that mean? Anger is not the issue. We all get angry. Anger, there's actually 6 kinds. Anger is actually a really good thing because it tells us something's wrong, whether it's an adult or a child. And anger is really when I work with students and parents, it's the volcano that erupts, right? And that volcano is the anger, but underneath the volcano, right? If you know anything about volcanoes, there are other things that make that volcano erupt. And that's where you get into emotion, right? And there's 2 things we have to remember. We don't address, worry and insecurity. Absolutely. We don't address the anger, we address the emotion, okay? And second of all, if you are going to coach your child to learn to have all the things you want them, I would imagine self-control, focus, better stewards of their own emotions. We as adults first have to check ourselves. How are we feeling in the moment of the situation? How are we feeling as either we're homeschooling, we're disciplining, whatever we're doing, how are we feeling? Because I have to tell you something that I learned the hard way with my eldest, okay? I am a former angry person, okay? And so I get anger better than anybody. I grew up in a home in which my mom loved me, but she was an angry person as well. So I get anger. And so what happens is this: if we are angry if we are hopeless, if we are sad, if we are frustrated, immediately at that point, you cannot coach your child. Because at that moment, you are just like your child. When we're angry, frustrated, irritated, hopeless, annoyed, we are operating from the back of our brain, which is our fight and flight sensors, right? Which a lot of children, when you see that anger, they're in fight, flight, or freeze. Well, so are we if we're in there, and we can't discipline, we can't coach, we can't get our children where they need to go if we are not in the front part of our brain, otherwise known as the cerebral cortex, which is the logic part of our brain. If you're trying to speak to a child or teen or young adult that's angry, they are back here. They are not here. So thus, you're wasting your time attempting to be logical. But we'll talk more about that, right? Logic does not work on angry people, okay? Don't believe me? Next time you're angry, tell me how you feel about someone throwing logic at you. None of us want to hear logic because we're either in fight, freeze, or fight, freezing, or flying away. And I don't come to me. Sorry, it's been a long day. All right, let's talk about the myths. Okay, I want to talk about the myths and the truth, and here's why. I have a passion. I get really a little perturbed when people say that children with ADD, ADHD cannot focus. That is just simply not true. Okay, that is not a true statement. Everybody can focus if they're in the right environment. Okay, and if they're doing things that are meaningful and relevant. All right, all of us, myself included, I get bored walking a treadmill. Why? Because it's not meaningful, it's not relevant, it's boring as all heck. Okay, and so one of the strategies in learning how to exercise is find something that's meaningful and relevant if you want to continue to exercise. Well, our children and our teens, if it is not meaningful, if it is not relevant to their lives, to their sphere of influence, then they're going to be like, whatever. Now, that's not to say that they don't have to learn to read and write and do chores and do all the things that we may struggle with them, right? But we need to stop saying that they can't focus. We need to start asking a better question, and that is, how do I make whatever it is I'm trying to motivate a child to do or a teen meaningful and relevant, which is what I do when I work with families, is how do we make this meaningful and relevant? And guess what? What's meaningful and relevant to one child may not be meaningful and relevant to the other. I know I got 3 and they're all different. All of them are very different. The other thing is my child doesn't want to learn. My child, could care less about reading and writing. That may be true. They could care less about reading and writing. I always say the joke is I was a college teacher. I have a master's degree. I have several degrees, and all 3 of my children don't like to learn. Okay. And it's just really funny because I've learned so much about my 3 humans that don't like to learn for different reasons. They don't like to learn. Humans were designed to learn. And so that is also a misnomer. Children with ADD and ADHD can learn. The question is, what is affecting and interfering in their learning? Or if it comes to chores or motivation, what's affecting that? That can be physical, that can be emotional, that can be cognitive, that can be learning style, that can be how does their brain process information. And so there are many factors that affect why a child, quote unquote, isn't focusing, or quote unquote does not want to learn when I'm not motivated. Let me tell you, all children want to learn to read, all children want to learn to write, all children want to be good at math. There is no one who doesn't, right? Nobody likes to be nagged to death. Nobody wants to be told, get your homework done. So the question becomes, all right, how do I make this meaningful and relevant? And the other thing that is significant across ADD and ADHD is all children, they're looking for a dopamine hit, right? So dopamine is a hormone in which if I'm not getting that, okay, you don't believe me? We may not be ADD or ADHD personally. However, I believe that I'm postmenopausal ADD, ADHD, okay? And that is because we're bored, right? And so when we're not engaged, it's not relevant, and we're not getting a dopamine hit, then we are really like, right? Don't ask me to watch baseball. I don't know how my husband watches baseball because I sit there, he's explained it, I get their strategy, I'm like, oh my God, I'd rather be getting my teeth cleaned. So all of us, right, have that. Children who are, neurodiverse, or they have a different kind of brain, we all are neurodiverse, except that certain characteristics show up in our ADD and our ADHD diagnosed children. And we need to understand how that plays out in what we were trying to get them to do. All right. So strategies, I'm going to give you some general strategy. These are not all the strategies of all the world and, in every child, but these are the ones I continuously see over and over and over and over in my practice as I work individually with students, as I work individually with couples or parents, and I work with schools, right? This is what I see over. The first thing is we've got to figure out what's getting in the way of physical, right? What is happening physically? That means, number one, if we have gaps in nutrition, as I'm sure some of you have heard, then that affects our brain. If our gut isn't healthy, that affects our brain. This is all humans, right? This is just a general. 80% of serotonin is in our gut, okay? That's our happy drug, right? That's we're happy, okay? We know that there's a lot around that. Now, I know children are very difficult and teens to get to eat healthy. I hear you. I mean, I'd rather have pizza too. Who wouldn't, right? And so one of the things I do is I work very closely to come up with some holistic supports and supplementation. Now, medication, I am not an expert at medication, but I do have a lot of parents who utilize medication. And I always say this, definitely work with the person who has prescribed that medication. But I will say this, and I know enough about this. Medication always has side effects. Medication long-term can affect social, emotional, and can affect brain development in different ways, right? And so I think it's important to do your due diligence when you're making those decisions. I do believe in parental choice, and parents need to make the best informed choice that they need to make, but make sure it's an informed choice. I tend to lean, a lot of my parents want to learn about holistic supports. A couple of just quick ones is omegas. A couple of the standard things is your child needs a unrefined omega. They need something that's not processed and not in a gummy. They need something because omega, it helps that brain function and focus and do really well. And by the way, 90% of Americans are omega deficient, all of us. And so we really need that. Another one is magnesium, which really helps with body function. Nordic Naturals omegas, that's great, Allison, those are great. I use for my omega, because by the way, my son has sensory issues. I couldn't get an omega in that boy to save my life. I use, it'll come to me, Melaleuca, that's the name of a company. It's a company of sorts, and I get that from them, and that's where I get my omega, but I tried a lot of different ones. There's a lot of really good ones. What you're looking for is unrefined. What you're looking for is not processed. You're not looking for gummies. I'm very anti-gummies. If it's in a gummy, it is severely processed at that point. So no gummies, liquids are better, but you want to look for unrefined, non-GMO, right? You want to really do your due diligence. And then the other thing is magnesium. And another is a soil-based probiotic. You really want to make sure you have a soil-based probiotic. That's really good. My favorite probiotic is from doTERRA. I'm a huge fan of their probiotic for kids because I have found it's the best on the market. But there's a lot of different ones, but just want to make sure it's soil-based. Those are three basic ones, okay? If you work with me, we'll get into more detailed as we look at behavior, but those are three things that I utilize consistently. Assessment and therapies. Not every assessment is done in school. So if you're getting testing done at school, it doesn't cover everything. If you get a neuropsych evaluation, it doesn't cover everything. So what I do is I do gaps in assessment, right? I wish when my daughter went through this, I wish I would have known what are the gaps in assessment. We need to know that if a child is not functioning, we need to get every piece of evidence and data, not because that's the end all and be all, but it helps us develop a roadmap when we're trying to work with our children. And so many things are missed in schools as well as in private practice. There were so many things that were missed in my daughter that, man, I didn't find out she was a junior in high school, senior in high school. It's like, okay, by that point, it was not super helpful. So really knowing what kind of assessments to get. There are many therapies, there are many assessments. My recommendation is make sure that you get independent research on therapies, make sure you do your due diligence, make sure that it's not just the pediatrician you're checking with. Okay, that's certainly one place you can go, but I'm a huge fan of specialists, and ensuring that that we are well-rounded neuropath doctors. There's so many different types. The challenge for the parent that drives us crazy is that they are each specialist, and you don't get all of them right in one shot, which I didn't. Right? We work with some specialists. So what I do is I help you look at the whole thing, right? And I tell you where to go, do referrals out. Strength-based learning roadmap, student-led learning. If you're going to homeschool, okay, it's got to be strength-based, meaning it needs to be student-led. What does that mean? In my homeschool coaching program, we go all the different ways you can homeschool. There's a bajillion, by the way. But I have found with my ADHDers, we need student-led, doing things that are interesting to them. We can actually do so much in terms of the reading and the writing and the vocabulary and the spelling within things that are student-led. I do believe if your child has dyslexia or dyscalculia, you do need a really strong curriculum. And that's something that I go over with my parents, which are the best, what are research-based. But in general, the rest of them is student-led, hands-on, kinesthetic, sensory curriculum that is really going to have them be relevant and engaged, okay? Children, adults, teens learn better when they're interested in what they're learning. That's going to put the onus on us as the adult, okay? As the adult, we need to figure out how they learn, what their learning style is, and what is relevant and meaningful to them. I love working with teenagers because they just tell us all kinds of things. So I love it. Student-led learning environment. This is the bread and butter, right? This is like really important. I love working with adults and parents and teachers on this, is coaching, communication, connection, right? I teach people, how do you coach, how do you communicate, and how do you form connection? Those are the 3 C's that we have to do with students if they're unmotivated, if they're resistant. These are all humans, right? But in particular, if we're not connecting, if we're not communicating effectively with our student, and how do you know if you're communicating effectively? Because parents will say to me, I've told him 5 times. You're not communicating effectively, because how's that working for you? Right? None of us, I'm a marriage coach, right? If I tell my husband something and he ain't doing it, I'm not communicating effectively, and vice versa, right? So communication means you're communicating in a way that makes sense for that child, that teen's brain. That's what that means, right? And there are many strategies and many ways that I have learned with my families and my own kid, right? 4 kids. Okay, let's stop here for a second. You have 4 kids. All 4 of them are what you are talking about. Okay, and just, I have a D, so I don't know what the rest of that one says. I don't know if you can tell me, Miss Allison. Oh, there we go. All what you are talking about, and I don't have enough time to do student-led learning, but want to do really bad. You know what? I've always worked full-time and homeschool, right? I work full-time right now, and I homeschool 2 children. So I work a lot with working homeschool moms. It's one of my niches. I don't know how it happened, probably because I do it. But there's a lot of ways. It is not about developing an individual curriculum for each child. If there is ways, and again, in my homeschool coaching program, we go, how do you do this for multiple children? I have friends who have 7 children, right? And they all have different things, right? And so how do you do that and not lose your mind and spend 22 hours? By the way, truth be told, don't tell anybody. I don't like spending hours upon end developing curriculum. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I also don't believe in spending $1 bajillion on curriculum either, because most of the time it's not going to work. Why? Because with my eldest, I spent way too much money on curriculums that didn't work. So there is a lot you can do. There's a lot of strategies. And so definitely if we connect, there's a lot of different things. But you do have to be realistic about what kind of homeschooler you are, right? If you need a step-by-step, then you're going to need to buy a curriculum of some sort. And there's some that are better than others for ADD, ADHD. But if you are more creative and you want to do your thing, that's great. Again, I always recommend, if they have any reading or math issues, that you do get a solid curriculum if you're going to homeschool, or you go to a reading or math therapist so they can do it, right? Which is what I do, right? That's really, really important. For my eldest, she went to a reading therapist. She wasn't reading at 5th grade. I didn't know any of this. She did 5 years of reading therapy. It was worth every cent I paid. And so it's really important. Okay. The environment, when I talk about the environment, remember, we are the adults in the room. We have the full brain. right? We were, because you have a full brain if you're over 25. Until you're 25, you don't have full brain, right? The frontal cortex is not done growing. So here's the thing. If our children, if our students are not doing what they need to do, then the question always becomes, my communication method is not working. For example, here's, I'm gonna give you something worth $1 million right now. Are you ready? Everybody write this down. I'm telling you, if you do this, you are gonna save yourself some heartache. Stop being logical with illogical human beings. Some of you think that if I just say it 10 times and I explain all of the theory behind it, that miraculously that 8-year-old is going to be, you're right, mom and dad. You're absolutely right. Stop being logical with individuals who do not have a full brain. 25, remember, until they're 25, right? And stop giving so much information, because typically ADHDers, ADD on the spectrum they get overwhelmed very easily, and you're talking a lot. And believe me, I'm a talker, right? My husband and all my kids say I talk too much. I'm a talker. So I've had to learn, when I'm trying to motivate and to coach, to keep it super duper simple, one sentence, right? Very simple strategy. Let's use the love and logic model, right? Love and logic is one of my favorite resources, right? It is one of my favorite, right? When you do this, you'll do this. When you do this, you'll get to do that. Now, what parents will typically tell me is, but they won't. Well, then they don't have incentive. So then the question becomes, is how are we going to incentivize that child? Because ADD and ADHDers don't think long-term most of the time until they develop that skill. They need immediate dopamine hit. They need it today, and they need to know. And so the problem is we get upset many times because they're not immediate, right? And we get upset because they just won't do it. Well, if they won't do it, the question becomes is, why won't they do it? And that's a very complicated question, but there is a reason why they aren't doing the math, the reading, the chores. There is a reason. Besides, there's just humans who don't want to do unfun stuff. None of us do. But we have to stop and realize that they're never at this stage of the game. Young children and teens, they don't have logic. So stop being logical. Be real simple. And the second thing is, you need to connect emotionally with your child. So for example, last example, child is annoyed as all heck, right? Annoyed about whatever. I don't know what it is. Most of us will ignore and will say something like, get over it, or you have to do it, or, that's the way it is, or just suck it up, or I don't know, all the crazy things parents say, right? And I've said, right, we've all messed up. Instead of stopping in step one, I'm not going to give you all the steps, we don't have time, but step one is, you're really frustrated. You're really pissed off. You're really bored. See, just that one step, step one, that's step one, by the way. We got last steps, but that's step one. If you don't do that, you're not connecting. And if you don't connect with that child, they're like, what's the point? See, because there's two fundamental truths about children and teens, even teens, and the research confirms this. They all want to learn, they all want to behave well, and they all want to please the adults in their life. I know you think teens don't, but they do. But if we don't do step one, connect. Why don't we do step one? Either because we never learned that in our own homes, or we just don't like feelings, or we don't even understand how to do that, right? And so step one is learn and teach the children in your life to first start with emotion, right? My son was all upset today. Something's going on at school tomorrow. They're changing the schedule, blah, 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 in his co-op, and he was all out of sorts. Now, I could have said, hey, suck it up. Oh, well, move on. You got to go to school. Now, he does have to go to his co-op tomorrow. But I stopped with, you seem extremely concerned and worried about this change of schedule tomorrow. Yes. Why? Why are you concerned about the schedule change tomorrow? And he went on to tell me all the reasons why. So that's step one. There's more steps, right? Yes, fidget, movement breaks, all important, right? ADD, ADHDers, they got to move, right? I'm serious. I used to teach college students for 16, 17 years. They needed a break every 20 minutes and they're full grown adults. Okay, so how much more? So you got it. They can't sit and do worksheets. All my kids hate worksheets, by the way, just so you know, all of them, all three of them. Okay.
One thing, Elizabeth, on the student-led learning, I'm thinking about my kids. My kids are grown, but they were homeschooled. They graduated homeschool, and I worked full-time, ran a business the whole 9 yards. So it can be done. So for the mom that's out there that's saying that they would really love to do it, I just want to say, don't doubt yourself, because it absolutely can be done. Yes. And it can be overwhelming when you're first thinking about this, because there's so much curriculum. I could tell you every curriculum out there. I know them all. But I think at first you want to just buy one box of curriculum for everything. And I found that piecemealing and meeting the kid where they are with the various curriculum out there is better. There's a lot of different options out there. But I think the key thing is their frontal lobe lighting up. So we talk about the kids and how they can't focus. And it's true. I mean, they have a focus deficit. But we also have seen these same kids sit down and build massive Lego things, or one of my kids worked for hours and hours on end creating these clay things and created videos, and that was fun, and could sit there for hours on end, piecing together videos, and that was lighting up that frontal lobe. So if we're finding things that are lighting up that frontal lobe that they have interest in, then things get better. And I have to tell you, I mean, this is the Mother of the Year badge revoked, but for one of my kids, literally, if I let her spin around in the chair while she did her times tables or her spelling words, we knocked them out. But if I made her sit still and do that, it was terrible. But so like that fidgeting, that getting up, and sometimes I would let her bounce on a ball. I mean, it was ridiculous. Somebody else would look at it and think it was ridiculous, but then somehow we would get through it and we would win. But she was moving and learning and kind of growing at the same time. So I think all of those things are really, really important in the process.
Right. I mean, I concur, Allison, with everything that you say. And just one more thing to add about that. I think because I coach a lot of homeschoolers, right? One of the things that moms do a lot is they stress themselves out, right? They get into fear mode. They compare what they're doing to the public school system or private school system. And I always say, right, comparison is a thief of joy. We homeschool. This is why I like home education, right? We homeschool because we want to create something different for our children. And so part of when I'm working with parents is they're anxious and they're stressed because they feel behind. And I hate that's not true. And there's some kind of timetable in their own head that they're thinking about, right? And so I think that if we got to start with your own mindset as the teacher, as the homeschooling parent, to say, it's okay, it's going to be okay, and not doubt yourself, and get help when you need help, and ensure that it's going to be okay. All right. I did not homeschool my first one perfectly. Okay. I don't homeschool my other two perfectly, but guess what? My first one is adulting very, very well. And a lot of parents, it's not about perfection. It's about really, again, that connection, that communication, and coaching them through and figuring out the why of the resistance. If we can figure out that why, then at that point, everything else becomes smooth sailing, right? My son builds ramps. He spent 4 hours building a ramp outside in the mud. I'm like, okay, for his bike. I'm like, okay. So kids can focus. It's just, it's really, really important. Okay, how do you pair the work with dopamine release? Token boards? For some, yes. For some, not all students, those token boards. I just started a new app because I adopted my second one. It'll come to me what the name of it is. I'll look it up here on my phone. So some kids respond very well to point systems, tokens, money. We do both points and money for some things, points for other, and then those points buy you privileges, things like YouTube, things like a phone. Like we don't do phones during the weekday, right? So only on the weekends, and we only do YouTube on the weekends. And so you got to buy that throughout the week to get to that, right? And so from what I have found in my practice is it's got to be immediate, right? It's really, really, really immediate in terms of they're seeing it. Sometimes you can try different things. Apps, you can try just a board, like say, old school little board, chips, stones, whatever. It doesn't have to be super complicated as long as they're part of the process of what they want to earn, right? It has to be relevant. For my two, these little boys right here, right now, YouTube, phone. That's what they want, right? And I don't want them on all the time because we understand the dangers of all of that to the brain, but they can earn certain things. And I also have how they lose some points. And I try to focus more on the positive. And on occasion, I'll pull out the losing of privileges. But most of the time, what works for them is they're excited about seeing these points on the app and learning every weekend they start over and they got to earn a certain number of points to watch a certain amount of YouTube, right? Supervised, of course. So that's I agree, right? Try some different things, but here's the most important thing. Let your child be part of what they want to earn. Make it relevant to them. By the way, I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan around financial management, and I believe all children should learn Dave Ramsey. So that's why we do a combination of financial incentive for some things and why we do points for other privileges, things that they are trying to privilege that I don't have to give you, right? But so I like both. Again, how you do it, test it out, try some stuff, let your children give you some feedback, let your teens especially give you some feedback. So how can I help? Again, I have the picture of my 3 kiddos, and my 3 kiddos are my passion because you know what? As a mom, I've been through it all. It is very frustrating when we don't know how to help our kid. It is very frustrating when we don't know what good, and it's very frustrating when our kids are frustrated because our kids are wonderful. Our kids are amazing. They're all smart. There's another book I would recommend called How Are You Smart? It's an old book, but it is the most fabulous book I read in the beginning of my journey. I don't even know who it's by, but just Google it. It's old. Because all kids are smart. The question becomes how, right? And so I would tell my daughter, you are smart. It's how are you smart? And so we would gear our homeschooling to her smartness, right? And that's really really important. So if you want to contact me, a couple things. Text is best, 408-561-5137. I'm a great texter. Email, sometimes I lose emails because I get so many of them, but text me. How can I work with you? Couple ways. One, if your child has an academic deficit with some kind of learning disability and you want to outsource that and they need therapy for reading or math or writing, that's what I do a lot of. I can do that online. I can do that in person with children. The other thing is I'm a homeschool coach. So I have 2 kinds of coaching programs. I do individual coaching with both homeschoolers and ADHD families. That is one-on-one when people really want one-on-one attention and they really want to do it. But what I've found, because like you, this is my passion, I found that price point is not realistic to a lot of people, right? Because one-on-one takes a lot of investment on my end. So I developed 2 much lower cost homeschooling parent strategy coaching program and ADHD behavior parent strategy program, depending on which one. The difference is if you're a homeschooler, do the homeschooling one. If you're a public or private or charter school, do the ADHD behavior. And what that is we meet twice a month via Zoom. We have some pre-recorded modules. We have a private Facebook group, but everybody comes to those 2, drop in. And again, you have to come all the time and I record all of them. And that's where you get to sit with me, pick my brain and say, I need the answer to this. And I give you that answer. And so I call it like having a learning and behavior therapist on call anytime you need it. A learning and behavior therapist to ask a question. Most of the time, 1 to 5 people show up. So sometimes it's just you and me. So that's how I help parents. And it really is my privilege. Just to give you a statistic wise, parents, if I can send you reviews, 98% of people who work with me on behavior issues or academic issues all see improvement, right? And I have tons of parent referrals and reviews because I do something that a lot of people don't do. And that is I am extremely tailored. I have a wealth of experience, both personally and professionally. I've been that mom who's ready to lose it and crying because I don't know what to do. My son, the eldest, Marcus, he used to tantrum for an hour and a half and I didn't know what to do. And the only thing people would tell me is medicate him. Again, I respect if you're medicating your children. For us, that was not a choice we wanted to go. I sat here crying in my office, telling my husband we got to medicate him. He was like, nope. We went on a journey. And now my son, working in school, no more tantrums, mental flexibility. So I tell you, when I work with my families, your kids become my kids. because I get what it feels like when you sit there and you have no idea what to do, where to start, you're overwhelmed, and no one's giving you answers. So that's how I work with all my families, and it would be my pleasure to work with you all. Do we have any more questions?
Elizabeth, I want to, we did have another question. I'll get to that in just a second, but I wanted to talk about, I think part of it, you know, a lot of our kids are struggling learners. Yes, there's twice exceptional. We've got kids that are gifted, that are ADHD, but a lot of them do struggle with all of the things you mentioned, you know, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, you know, all of the above, whatever. But for me, part of homeschooling was dialing it back and meeting my kid exactly where she was. And even if that's a year or a year and a half behind, you know, you talked about this, and my husband always says this, they're not behind. They are where they are in the grand scheme of life, okay? But when we're comparing what everybody else is doing, then you start feeling the stress. But the problem is so sometimes people want to go and start this homeschool route, right? And then they go to some of these curriculums, and these curriculums have a test that they try to peg to see where your kid is, and your kid does the test, and then surprise, your kid does poorly on the test. Then you're very upset because they want to start the kid where they are at, which is the best thing to do, and then move them forward, as opposed to, you know, we didn't, you know, like I give an example of something that happened in my daughter's third grade class when she was in school before homeschool. The entire class failed a math test. The entire class, even the straight A students, they all failed, all of them. But did they go back and reteach that unit?
No.
No. We just went on to the next one. Everybody got an F. Nobody understood the concept. But the very next chapter, we're building on the concept that nobody else understood.
Yep.
And so that's what I mean. It's like if you just keep pressing forward, but you didn't learn that fundamental concept to begin with, they're not getting where they're going. So even if you have to take a few steps back to close those gaps that are there, it's okay, because then you're going to move them completely forward. And so I just wanted to tell anybody that's ever done that or got that test back and was disappointed with the results, or you couldn't believe it. And well, my kid's in fourth grade, and by golly, they're going to be doing fourth grade work. Well, if they're functioning at a third grade level, you need to have them doing third grade work so they can have some wins. They want to win. If they have some wins, then they're going to even be more motivated to take those next steps. And so I just wanted to encourage anybody that's out there that's thinking about it, that it's definitely possible. So one person asked, do you know of another omega that is not a fish oil? We found that my child is allergic to the fish oils, and we've tried the algae oil.
I am not. There are plant-based omegas, because I was a vegan for a year. So I'm very much I believe in veganism or for allergies. I have not tried one, so I can't recommend a brand, but if you do go into some crunchy homeschool, crunchy moms groups, right? Like every Facebook has a crunchy group of some sort, and ask if there is a vegan omega. There is. I know that there is. And in fact, my vitamins that I take, my omega is vegan, but that's for adults. doTERRA does not make a kids vegan omega. So I would just ask around in some of these, what I call crunchy groups, just like Facebook crunchy Facebook groups, and ask, say, hey, what non-fish omega is your child that is bioavailable, right? The word is that is non-processed, it's bioavailable, and that's what you want to do. I have not tried. I don't have a brand for you, but yes, you can do that if you have an allergy or you're vegan. Absolutely. And you can still get your omegas that way. Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have somebody else that says, in the chat box, if you use a point system, partner it with a physical or visual representation, i.e. sticker chart, marble jar, etc. It can be really beneficial for those visual learners, and it plays positively into that dopamine seeking. One of the things that we've seen positive is like the Schaberg family store. So they're earning points, and the little family store is full of, and maybe it's this much time with YouTube, or this much time screen time, or maybe it's a specific trip to Walmart or Target and they get $10 or something like that. But the family store was another hit that we've seen. before. Someone says, if I'm not able to homeschool, how do you enforce these learning styles in school? And I guess I'm going to like an ARD or an IEP. Can we talk about that just for a second? I know we're running out of time. We still have a few minutes.
It's okay. I have time. One of the things is that I do for both clients who are working with me, or people sometimes hire me specifically to do what we call advocacy work. And so one of the things I do is people, well, I don't put on here because then there'd be too many things on there, but I am an advocate and I do understand all of the laws in every state around IEPs, 504s. And so what I do when people hire me to do that is I will work with you to figure out, one, does your child have the right 504 or IEP? Are the accommodations appropriate? What have they missed? What are they not doing? What is the law behind that? And I will accompany my parents and in a positive, respectful way, come to meetings. I first equip the parent ahead of time to know what questions to ask. And then I'm there to support the parent, but certainly if I see something, I will speak up. But I really want that parent to be that contact with the school. And I will help educate you as the parent on not only the legal part of it, but also sometimes they're just not written correctly. I worked in Fort Worth ISD, and that's all I'm going to say is this. IEPs and 504s most of the time are not written correctly. Part of it is because sometimes teachers in those districts, they don't get the training. That's part of the big issue we're having right now. And then part of it, they're understaffed. And then lastly, there's a lot of union rules around districts and, just so much. It's so layered. And so I don't want to say that these people don't care and they love kids. It's just, there's so many layers to it. And so I help parents advocate. And if you're in either one of my parent one, homeschooling or ADHD, we talk about advocacy in the ADHD one, what to ask, how to go about it, what do you say, what do you document, what testing was done if they won't do testing. So that's what I do. And here's the bottom line. If you've done all of that, right, I always say if you're determined to keep them in public or private school, let's do all of that. And at the end of the day, if we're still not getting the results that we want, then at that point, as a parent, we have to discuss either a different kind of schooling system and or we homeschool, right? But prior to getting to that point, we really want to exhaust all possibilities. I've worked with some public schools here locally. They love when I come and the teachers meet with me and they want ideas. Some of the teachers I meet, they're like, we've tried all this, it doesn't work. And so they'll meet with me via Zoom and we'll go through and then we'll check back and they love me, right? And they're like, great, let's do this. Private schools don't get federal state money. So private school people really like when I come to the table because they want ideas. I have to tell you, just because you're an educated, certified teacher, by the way, my husband is a 3rd through 5th grade resource at a charter school, special ed. Just because you are a teacher doesn't mean you know what to do. Even special education teachers, which my husband is one, they don't know all the tests. They don't know all the stress. I mean, there's a lot of gaps because of the way we educate teachers. So sometimes they welcome an advocate and they welcome somebody at the table. Bottom line is this. In the end, you have to have some really hard conversations with yourself and a partner or a spouse about, is this the best school environment? Public, private, charter, is that best? And many times people think, well, I can't do private because I can't afford it, right? But there are many, many, many private opportunities now post-COVID in which there are co-ops. My co-op is 4 days. Like it's homeschooling, but my kid goes to school 4 days, right? But it's homeschooling, but it's private, but it's co-op and it's very low cost. So, right.
There's some great co-ops in the greater Houston area, Sugarland. There are great homeschool co-ops around.
Yeah. So one of the good things of COVID, now there's a lot of bad things, but one of the good things it's done is it created a lot of these co-ops. For example, my son's co-op, they tell me what curriculum to buy. They tell me what the homework is and they give it to me. Now I do some other things that they don't do. I have a science co-op I run. I have a friend who runs a cooking co-op and we get together on off days. But as far as the core of math and reading and all that, and they tell me and I didn't have to do much thinking and they keep me on track and we know what we're doing. And they have plays and little things like that and art and PE and all that good stuff. So I think that if your child is struggling and you've exhausted all avenues in your public school, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, then you need to begin to search somewhere else, because a discouraged child is difficult to pull back if they've been in the system for a long time, right? I work with teens right now who are very discouraged, and we are just redoing the whole thing. I do advocacy, and we just got to be willing to think outside the box. But certainly step one is I do advocacy work, and let's see if we can make it better. And there's parents a lot of times don't know the laws, and a lot of the times, again, teachers and administrators, many times, they're just not trained with everything. And so that's what I would do. I would do that. My son, actually, Marcus, we didn't homeschool him at first. He was in private school because I was really busy launching a business and going full-time in my business. And then he went to a private school, an ADHD private autistic school. I have to say it ended badly. These are the experts who supposedly were the experts to help my son. And in the end, they were not the experts. And that's why we ended up homeschooling my son. And then Zachary, when we got him, we immediately went to homeschooling because he's below grade level, right? And so he's not at level. And if I he was in second grade in public school, and he's reading at a kinder level, and he's at math level 1, and he was in a second grade public school, and it just wasn't going to get better, right? So I think there's lots of options, and here's what I would say.
I want to mention though, on some of the options too, because some people are saying, you know, it's just not an option. Like, I got to work. I can't, this is just not going to work. But there are other options too, from a perspective of hiring a caregiver or somebody that implements the homeschool, or some of these co-ops and some of these things. And we're not like pro homeschool or anti-public school or anti-private school. It's whatever works. It's about meeting the kid where they are. But one of the things I remember when I was nervous, I have to tell you, I was scared, busy, ran a business, busy when I decided to pull my child out of school. And I remember telling her, I said, I don't know if this is going to be a good thing, but I know what we're doing right now is not working. And this could be the worst thing that we've ever did. But if it is, then we know where the public school is, we know where the private school is, and we'll back up and punt if we need to. But we never looked back. It was the best thing we ever did. We just had to have the courage to get out of the boat, because what we were doing was horrible. and so thinking about that, and what is it, you know, like for us, what horrible was is, you know, going to school a half day, coming home with a migraine, sleeping for 3 hours, and then having 3 or 4 hours of homework in third grade. Come on, stop it. Like, I mean, it was miserable, and something had to give. So it just depends on where you are in your journey. If it's at that breaking point. We were at a breaking point. And for the parent that has something in the chat that said, you know, they want to take my child off of an IEP because he's testing well. That may be where you need to reach out to Elizabeth. You might need to hire an advocate. I am a strong proponent of that IEP not going away. Just because the kid tests well doesn't mean that they have a lot of other deficits that they need assistance with. So before you let that ship sail, reach out to someone, reach out to a professional, get an advocate on your side, because there's a lot more than just the test. And I know you know that as a parent already, but take a stand on that, and don't take no for an answer on that. Get somebody to help you with this. It's important.
One more other option, as far as like, if after, when you get to a point in which it's not working anymore, and I agree with you, I'm not anti-public school. Lots of my friends are public. It's just like, when we reach a point in which an environment is not working for a child, right? The other thing is micro schools. Micro schools were a result of the pandemic, that were a new concept after the pandemic. Those are wonderful. Micro school is when a bunch of people get together and they hire a teacher. And so you're getting a credentialed teacher, you're getting, you know, the homework. So that's another option, separate from co-ops, separate from a university style model schooling, separate from traditional homeschooling. I mean, there's just so many ways and options now, which is a crazy thing because you get overwhelmed, but it's a beautiful thing, because now we actually have more options in which our children who learn differently can go. And then the last thing, I really echo what Allison said. My daughter was struggling so bad before I knew she was dyslexic. We took a whole year off school, and all we did for a whole year, okay, is cook, visit museums, go to see plays, and watch documentaries. That's all we did for a year. Because she was so stressed out about reading. She felt so dumb. She was just at her wits' end. And at the time, I was not an expert, right? And so I was trying to find my way. My son, when we pulled out of traditional private school, he would not eat for 6 weeks. He did not want to do school. So we didn't do school for 9 months before we started our co-op. And so why am I telling you this? My son is 2 grades above level now academically, right, Marcus? Smart as a whip. But he needed time to transition, to decompress from his negative experiences that he had had. My daughter, 21, runs her own business, coaches 3 cheer teams, leads youth ministries. She works for herself since June, no college, no debt, went to vocational training, did a bunch of science and math. Never had a bunch of science and math. Okay, so she rocked it because it was relevant for her. And what we did in high school is, what are you going to do after? And we tailored that to her. It was so hard. We got her tutor so she passed state exam, but she didn't. You know why? Because it wasn't about comparing her or my son, and now my new son, to anybody else. That's your child. You do what works for your family, for your child, without worrying about what the rest of the world looks like. That, whether your kid's in public, private, charter, homeschooling, that's the essence of education.
For sure. We have one last question, and then we have to go for tonight. We're out of time.
Okay.
Do you go over all these options in your coaching program? Like you kind of lay out, you learn more about the family, learn more about the kid, and then kind of lay out maybe what some of those options are. Is that what you do?
Yes, and that's what I do in both the private and as well as the homeschooling group program. Absolutely. I mean, I'm here and my job is to help you answer all your questions, develop a roadmap, look at all the options, cost included, right? It would cost this, every single thing that would work. And part of that comes from really doing a very intensive interview with you as the parent, and if there's a partner or husband or somebody that wants to be part of that process, of what you want for your child. And then I also get to know your child as well. And I can also do what's called a functional assessment. And so there's a lot of different, every one of my families is a little different, right? So I do what works for you. But yes, we go all through that. I've got quite a bit of first-year homeschoolers this year who were scared to death, who work. All of them work, but they all wanted to homeschool and they were scared to death, and they are jamming now. Like, they started my program in September and they're rocking it. Their kids are doing great. So it doesn't matter what's going on. It really doesn't.
I say just don't be afraid, because it was the best thing we ever did. And like I said, if it's the worst thing you ever did, then you can go back to school. Fine. Like, you can go back. So just be encouraged and just know that there's help for you. There's lots of families homeschooling. There's co-ops everywhere, all across the state, all across the United States, that you can get involved in. Outside classes in your neighborhood. There's all kinds of stuff out there. So just know that. And I do reach out to Elizabeth. I just wanted to say one more time for the people that may have joined late and missed in the beginning. You guys are going to get an email with a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. Feel free to share that with anybody that may have missed tonight. Feel free to share that with your network. Also in the email, you're going to get an invitation to join ADA. They have an annual conference. It's really, really good. They have different groups all across the area. But I just want you to be on the lookout for the flyer for the event on April 20th from 9 to 12:30 at Monarch in Houston. There will be a flyer for that and how you can attend that. So do check that out. That will be attached. And I thank everybody for taking their time out of their busy evening tonight to be with us. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And happy connecting for the families that need your services. I hope you guys can connect, but just feel encouraged. I can say that from a mom with grown kids that I did that. I did it. We went from 3rd grade to through high school graduation, went to college on a full ride scholarship. It works. And all we did was meet the kid where they were. We had to back up a little bit before we moved forward, but boy, did we move forward. And you said the same thing, Elizabeth. So just be encouraged. Your kids got this. They're smart and they've got you. So we are thankful for that. So thanks, everyone. And we will catch up with you guys next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.